We are ready to go here. I'm going to shut my video off and mute myself, and it is your show, Skylar. I'm looking forward to this.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I'd like to thank Navionics and Bass Pro Shop for getting this together. This will be my rookie season on the Elite Series, my first classic, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I'm going to approach this season and some things that you can take to your, either if you're a tournament fisherman or a weekend angler, you can take and write a few things down, and this will help you a lot too. This isn't just for me. I wanted to teach you guys a few things, and I'm still learning a lot of stuff, but I've learned. I fished the Open since I was 16, so I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that may help you guys as well. We're going to the next slide here at some point. There we go. This is just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Big Stone Gap, Virginia, which is on the other side of Bristol, Tennessee, basically in the very corner of Virginia. Grew up there, went to high school there, learned how to fish in some of the mountain lakes around there, lived on the Powell River, and really got my start for love of fishing there. So I grew up fishing out of a kayak and fishing out of a plastic boat, and we always had a place on Douglas Lake here in Tennessee, but that was really where all my fishing started. And I started fishing the Opens at 16, had to get my parents to go with me to sign all my paperwork, and my mom was always hanging around signing stuff because I wasn't old enough, and I had to convince them to fish as a pro at 16, which was it was on Douglas Lake, so it didn't take much convincing. But I would definitely recommend starting out as a co-angler because you learn a lot more. I think that I would have learned a lot. I mean, I learned stuff the hard way and jumping right into it, but fishing out the back of those guys' boats is really helpful. I've seen a lot of great co-anglers, and they learn a whole lot. I'm 22 now. I live in Dandridge, just up the road from Knoxville and Dollywood and all that good stuff. And I live on Douglas Lake and Cherokee Lake, and fish those lakes all the time. Grew up fishing those lakes. Cherokee is our first Elite Series event, which is very exciting. So, we're better to start my Elite Series career than Cherokee, but Douglas and Cherokee have been. I've always had a place on Douglas. My parents have always had a camper or something, my grandparents, so I grew up fishing those two lakes. But qualified for the 2017 Elite Series through the Bassmaster Central Opens. I fished the Southern and the Central divisions last year. I didn't fish the Northern divisions, but the Southern division was pretty tough. We had Douglas on the schedule last season, and I didn't do too well there. But the Central division was basically all river systems. We had the Arkansas River, which I won, the Red River, and the Chaffalaa Basin. So they were all pretty much shallow water fisheries, so I did really well there. And that's how I got my qualification. I qualified for the Classic through winning that Central Open on the Arkansas River. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that as we go on, too. I'm the first Elite Series angler to use an aluminum boat for an entire series, and there's been guys that have used them. They had a rule before they changed it that you could switch boats throughout the season, and they changed that recently. So whatever boat you start with, which will be at Cherokee, I'll have to use the entire season. Now the Opens are different. You can swap boats throughout the day or through each day, so you can fish out one boat one day and another boat the next. And the Elite Series used to be like that, but there were some guys that utilized aluminum boats then. But now that you have to use them the full season, they've kind of shied away. And I'm running an Express X21, which is a full-size aluminum boat. It's not, the little aluminum boat that I was using in the Opens, because we have some bigger waters that I have to fish, some of the Great Lakes, St. Clair, and we have some places in New York that on the schedule next year that I have to fish that are pretty big, and some places in Texas that are pretty big water too. And that X21 will be able to go shallow, but it'll also get me there and back without having to worry about sinking. River fishing and shallow water fishing, that's my favorite thing to do. Growing up here in Tennessee and in Virginia, that's all we really have. We've got some great deep fishing here on Douglas too, but I just feel comfortable fishing shallow, and that's why I'm running a aluminum boat to kind of, it doesn't limit you to where you can fish, but makes me remember that I have an aluminum boat for a reason. You know, that Express will do anything you want to do, fish offshore, you know, whatever. But I look down and remember that that's what got me there, so I might as well stick to it. I have amazing family, friends, fans, and sponsors that make my dream possible. There's no way I could do it without them. They're, you know, the reason I'm here. And if I'm blinking weird, it's because I have a terrible sty in my right eye. This morning I woke up and couldn't open my right eye. I've got the swelling down, so I didn't have to wear a patch that had the Navionics logo on it. But I thought they might like that, but I couldn't get one time. So it's doing a little bit better, but still hurts. So if I keep winking at you, I don't mean anything by it. Get you some your questions together. You know, write a few things down throughout the slides, and we can answer them at the end. Okay, this is I gathered this up. I hope my face isn't in the way of all the I don't think it is.
Skylar, just interrupt you real quick. Folks at home, if any of your slides, you're able to take your mouse and move Skylar's head around on your screen, and you can also make it smaller if you want to. So don't be afraid to slide him out of your way. Just a heads up. Didn't want to interrupt you, Skylar, but the people can't get around.
Listen, I do have a big head. It's not from I have a big head, not from winning these tournaments, but just from just in general. It's hard to find a hat that'll fit me. So that's just move me around wherever you want to put me. But I did the math on this morning, which I live in, you know, right outside of Knoxville, so I didn't count Cherokee. But the rest of the schedule, the traveling is, you know, we got 13,000 miles roughly, and it'll be a lot more than that after probably ICAST and all kinds of other events this year. That's just from the tournaments, the Bassmaster Elite Series and the Classic. The ones in New York are basically the furthest ones. I didn't realize that. I guess I didn't look at a map too good, but now looking at it, it's a long ways away. But, you know, the other ones aren't too far. They're within, you know, maybe a one-day drive if you time it right, or if you know, take your time. But New York's definitely a two-day trip. So I'm going to have to work those out. That's just some of the stats on this season that I'm going to have to deal with. You know, in fishing the opens, I had to travel a lot, but it wasn't as extensive. We only had a few places to go, and they were far, but it wasn't anything like this. So that's just part of it, and that's part of the stress of being an Elite Series angler. And we're going to talk to you a little bit how to deal with that. How I deal with it anyway. It's probably not how everybody deals with it, but preparing for travel. This is some of my tips for traveling, and I'm a little bit different than other folks, but organizing your boat and truck is probably one of the most important things you can do to make your trip successful. You know, get your extra tackle. You know, don't overpack, but make sure you have enough stuff. You have to make sure everything's organized and you know where everything's at. Once I come back from a trip, I should take a picture of my truck when I get back from somewhere, because that's not how you want it when you're going. You want it nice and neat when you're leaving to go somewhere, especially a long distance trip. You have to prepare for the worst. You know, flat tires, road emergencies. Always keep tire plugs, keep a spare tire, keep stuff that change those tires, keep jacks. You know, people might think they have all those the tools and the things necessary to get you on the road again, but you'll be surprised once you start looking in your vehicle that you don't have everything you need to change tire. And that's one thing that can ruin a trip, is having to change a tire or bearing or anything like that. So just make sure you have all the everything you need and be prepared. Lodging plans and reservations. This is something my mother is very good at. I call her the momager. She works at a bank, so she's around phones and stuff all the time, and she's a lot better at getting deals and finding places than I am. But that's sometimes it doesn't work out. She's put me in a few bad places with iguanas on the beds and cockroaches in the toilets. And one place in Florida, I left a sandwich out for the next morning, and half of it was eaten when I got up. So if you have anywhere, if you're concerned about where you're staying, a lot of the reviews are probably just not true, but there's going to be a few of them. if there's 100 reviews saying that it's bad, then it's probably bad. But you have to make sure that there's a place to plug your boat in. You have to make sure there's parking, because you'll call them and you need to look at it on Google Earth or any kind of mapping system and look at the actual hotel, because I don't know how many times we've asked them if they have plug-ins and parking or turnaround space, and you get there and there's one plug-in on the wall and there's nowhere to turn around. And with 10 boats in the parking lot, it doesn't work out too good. So that's a pretty big thing, is where you're going to stay. You can stay with friends and stuff, but I'm going to be staying in a lot of cheap motels, so I'm going to make sure they're right. Planning trips around rush hour traffic and busy times. Yeah, don't go through Nashville at 5 p.m. I travel a lot at night, which, some people will debate that, especially my dad. He hates driving at night. But if it's up to me, I'm going to sleep all day and get up about 7 o'clock in the evening and drive all night, because you'll see 1 or 2 vehicles in the busiest places. Go through Orlando or Nashville and see 2 or 3 cars. Don't hit them at 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, or 4 or 5 or 6 in the evening. It's going to be terrible. It's going to cut a couple hours off your trip. Been there. I had stress. I freak out in traffic. I'm the guy that's trying to get over. It's in the fast lane, but nobody let me over. So don't yell at me or something, because I'm trying to get over. Don't drive tired. Make it easy on yourself. The worst thing you can do, and I've been guilty of it too, the worst thing you can do is try to drive really tired. I mean, it's dangerous. You can fall asleep in an instant. So if you're tired, just pull over somewhere, take you a couple hour nap, get up and drive the rest of the way. It's a lot safer for you and everybody else out there. Pack adequate clothing, cold or hot weather. Even in Florida, I've been to Florida, pack shorts, short sleeve shirt, flip flops, get down there and it's 30-some degrees. It doesn't work out too good. Been down there and there's frost on the windshield. So just plan ahead. Make sure that you remember the weather, man, is not always right. So pack you a few long pants, pack you some tennis shoes. Just be prepared for whatever clothing you might need. Take some snacks. My preference is the oatmeal cake, Little Debbie oatmeal cake. They're compact. They're easy to hide in your truck for emergency situations. They don't take up much room. They really don't get old. Now, if you find them and they're like the white stuff's brown, you probably shouldn't eat them. But up until that point, they're pretty good. Count the number of underwear you pack compared to the number of days you're staying. That's a must. And make sure you actually count them, because if you pack your clothes, you'll have all your stuff on your bed or wherever you're at, and you'll go and you'll put your shirts and you'll put all that, and you'll think, well, I put plenty of underwear in there. I've done it 100 times, and I'm going to start learning, because I get somewhere and I'm have to be there for 12 days, 3 pair of underwear don't work out. You look for the best pair you got, and you pack them, and then you just forget it. You don't want to do that. Pack everything, pack all the underwear that you're going to need, because you don't want to go to the dollar store commando, because I've been there, and it ain't no fun. Be prepared for anything while traveling. You ain't Mayberry anymore. That's basically, I've been to some rough places. Detroit was a pretty scary place, and I'm not knocking anywhere that somebody might live, but somebody like me that lives in a town where there's about 1,000 people, going somewhere like that is with a boat and a truck and a motel door that doesn't lock is pretty scary. So just be aware, be prepared for anything that you might encounter. It's some people aren't as nice as what we think around the house, and I make that mistake a lot too. Let's go to the next slide here. Boat organization. Probably one of the most important things you can do, especially, and I'm telling you guys this, but this is stuff that I'm going to be doing for this coming season as well. I'm just trying to help you guys out too, that you can take a few of these things and use them. But you can look at my boat there. That's some new storage we have through Express. But the layouts, basically, there's a few other companies that make the same layout. I'll have the next slide. I'll have some detailed pictures, but you need to keep only the essentials in your boat. It saves weight, saves money on gas, better boat performance. It just lighter weight. So you're gonna, don't take your whole shed of tackle. in your boat. Leave some in your truck. If you know you're going to be taking throwing a worm or a jig, just take a few worms and jigs. Don't take everything you own, because it's going to slow down your boat and you're going to spend more money on gas. And that's one thing I do a lot. I don't put everything in my boat. I just take a few things that I need. And that kind of helps me fishing too, because when I get somewhere and I'm having a tough time, you really just need to find where the fish are biting. It's not about the bait. I mean, sometimes it's about the bait, but basically you need to figure out where the fish are biting first. Then you can work through your baits. But you don't need to be sitting in one place going through 25 different baits trying to figure out what they're eating. Take you a few baits that they're biting and try that, and it works out real good for me. You'll keep it simple. It's the same thing, basically. Go through your boat, find things you don't use, store them in your shed. If you have a boat and you've used it for 2 or 3 years or even longer, you accumulate things that you think you might need. They haven't been opened. You have a box that's been in there, your favorite crankbait box, and you've used 2 crankbaits out of it. Keep those 2 crankbaits in there. Take the other box and take the rest of them and put them in the garage. I mean, it's not like if you haven't used it in a year, or if you haven't used it in a few months, you're probably not going to use it. But if you can, you put it in your truck or something and you have it ready, but don't keep it in your boat. Have your most productive baits easy to access. That's what I have magnetic, TH Marine magnetic strips there in my lid on my Express. And I've got a few baits there that's from a recent trip. So I've got my, recent stuff there. Even if you don't have, magnetic, you don't have to have magnetic strips. You can just keep you a box of what you're going to use throughout the day and put it in the top of your compartment, so you don't have to go digging through all your stuff to figure out, where's your other jig that you just caught a 5-pounder on that bent the hook. You can grab your jig and get back to it real quick. Keep your safety equipment easy to access, like your first aid kit, your throw cushions, your fire extinguisher, and your paddle. The paddle mainly for snakes and alligators, which I've encountered many of. Wooden paddles that are old, just be aware, if you have a wooden paddle in your boat and you get a lot of moisture, that it will mold and deteriorate. So when you go to hit an alligator or a snake, it will bust in pieces and the snake or alligator will just laugh. Or when you go to paddle your boat in with no power, it will deteriorate and just have a toothpick, which I've done that as well. So keep that in mind. I have a plastic paddle in mine that collapses. So just check all that, make sure they're good to go, because you never use them, it seems like. But the time that you don't have them ready is when you will need to use them. So just keep that stuff handy. Keep your rods and reels organized. I use the rod glove. They're basically sleeves that goes over your rods, and you can see my rod box. There's no dividers. I didn't want any dividers in my rod box because I can fit a lot more rods without them. I just use the rod glove. There's other companies that make rod sleeves. You can fit 3 times as many rods in your boat with those sleeves. Don't have any tangles, and that don't hurt your rods at all. Very easy to pull out throughout the day. And so if I want to grab another rod, I can just take the sleeve off and grab it and go to town, go to work with it. And it's just a lot easier for me than trying to get it out of those little holes and all those newfangled rod storage systems. If you're trying a new technique, if you're trying to learn how to drop shot, and this is for basically practice, or well, not practice, but if you're fun fishing, leave everything else at your house. That way you'll make sure that you're going to learn that technique. If you take your tournament gear, your everyday fishing gear, and you want to go learn how to throw a frog or a drop shot or a crankbait, and you get out there and you're trying to figure out how to use it, and after about 2 hours you haven't figured it out, you're going to pick up something else and start fishing what you know. If you're trying to learn new stuff, it's not the best thing to do. So you need to leave everything else at the house. Take you a couple rods of what you're trying to learn to use, a box of plugs or a box of drop shot stuff, and just you'll learn a lot more. That's how I learned how to crankbait fish here on Douglas, was for about two or 3 months. I took everything out of the boat except for 3 crankbait rods and a box of crankbaits. Again, prepare for the worst. Rain gear, spare clothing. If you fall in, especially this time of year, you guys up north, falling through the ice is a serious concern. Make sure you have everything ready. Well, if the ice is 2 foot deep, I'm sure that's not, you can fall through a hole or something, but you get what I'm saying. You keep you some spare clothes ready, because if you fall in the lake down here this time of year, you're going to jump out and you're going to be freezing cold. And if you don't have spare clothes to change into, and you're by yourself, especially, a 30-minute boat trip back and it's 30 degrees outside and you're wet could turn into a disaster. I mean, you could end up hypothermic or even dead. I mean, it's a real possibility this time of year. Keep you some spare rain gear in case you forget yours at the house. Just keep you a cheap set of rain gear rolled up somewhere and never take it out. That can come in handy too, in case if you get stuck somewhere and have to stay overnight. You'll want all the clothes you can get. And never forget toilet paper. That's also prepare for the worst. You eat at the Waffle House first thing in the morning. Had you a big breakfast and your tournament getting ready to blast off, and you ain't got no toilet paper. That's a major concern of mine, especially fishing the Elite Series this coming season. I'm not sure how I'm going to work that out, because if I'm leading a day, I'm going to have about 50 boats following me around, so I'm going to have to come up with something so I'm not on the front page of websites hanging off my boat. We're going to have to figure some kind of system out for that. I haven't figured that out yet. I'll get back to you. Might be able to have a separate webinar on that. But never forget your toilet paper. Okay, this is my boat. I took the picture the other day. I just got back from a trip. This is, you can see basically how I do my organization. I keep my rods. It looks like a mess, but it's really, as long as you know where everything's at, you're good to go. I've got everything separated. And this is from a tree. This isn't how it looks before I go fishing. This is how it looks afterwards. You can see how many rods I have. They look like they're all tangled up, but they're perfectly fine. I can grab any of those rods, even from the bottom of the stack, pull them out and go fishing. Just take the sleeves off of them. You can fit a lot more like that. My center box, I've got even more storage if I can get my mouse to pull up. Got more storage on the sides. I can fit trays underneath. So I've got, the stuff that I'm going to use throughout the day in the center. I've got my scent spray and a few more baits, and I've got a towel to wipe my hands off with. That's pretty important too. People don't realize that, especially if it's raining or something. Just keep you a towel handy. Dry your hands. Just keep it in your pocket. Just dry them off every now and then. It'll help you a lot. Feeling your fishing pole and all that. Got my, this is the stuff that I'm going to use throughout the day. Got my jigs and stuff on all that. And then this side, I've got, you see my fire extinguisher is under this latch. Is under the other side of the latch is where I keep all my safety equipment, my paperwork. Keep extra baits on this side. Keep my fishing line. Got a net right here. It's got my scale in it, and it's a mess, but it's a pretty good system. I use those little totes. It helps me keep stuff organized, because if you put soft plastics, or unless you have waterproof storage boxes, if you keep your soft plastics in tackle trays, then they'll get moisture, and then sometimes they'll ruin. And hooks will do the same. So I keep all my hooks and stuff in the same packaging, and I just use these little totes, and then I'll separate them into bigger bags and put them in those totes, so they're definitely waterproof then. But you get the idea of how I keep my stuff. And I don't carry a lot of bait. I'm a pretty simple man. If you got there with 20 different kinds of baits, and you're having a rough time, you're going to throw every one you got in the boat. So if you're having a rough time, you need to throw what you know, and that's why I keep stuff that I know how to fish in my boat, instead of stuff that I hear people are catching on, or stuff that new stuff, and all that. To keep stuff I know I know I can catch them on. Like, I probably said stuff 500 times, but that's a Tennessee word we use here, so you have to excuse me. Research on tournament waters. This is a pretty important part here, and this can pertain to any not local events, but if you're going out of state to fish a tournament, the Elite Series, we have a lot of restrictions, so we can't get information a month prior to the Elite events. We can't get any private information. We can't get somebody to call us and tell us what's going on. Like we can't go pre-fishing a month beforehand. We can before the cutoff, but they're pretty strict on the information and the pre-fishing rules, which you guys probably, some of you won't have to worry about that. But just make sure. There's a lot of tournament trails around. There's a lot of different rules, so make sure that you're not breaking any rules, violating any rules. Do your online research. Google old tournament results, local fishing reports. Use the Navionics web app and the mobile app. That's what I do. I basically will go through and look. I'll Google the name of the lake. I'll look at old tournament results, from years past, and look at basically what kind of weight it's going to take that time of year that I'm going there. So if I go and I'm catching 52 pounders in one area, and it's going to take 20 pounds to win, then I probably need to find some more fish. You can go and really do good and then get your heart broke at the scales when the tournament starts if you don't know what it's going to take to win. Local fishing reports, there's always a dude or even news stations that'll have a fishing report for that area. So check that out too. And you can always use the Navionics site to look at contour lines and look at areas that, that may be productive. You can kind of scroll through and look at the lake you're going to be fishing, look at where you're going to be running your boat and look for productive areas. And that's really important for me, especially running skinny water, is finding routes they're going to be good for me. Old-fashioned paper maps, you can't go wrong with those. It's always good to have one. I don't use them very often, but certain lakes where I'm having trouble, if I'm kind of stumped or if it's a great big area, it's good to have it at your motel room. You want to just look at it, sit on your bed and look at it at night when you're not doing anything. Just keeps you in touch with the lake and kind of helps you figure it out a lot more. When you get out there, you know where you're at and get an idea of what you're looking at once you're on the water. Now, do your own thing. You want to get an idea of what the fish are doing, but when you're there, and you got to learn things for yourself. So you're going to hear all this stuff from the internet and from Google and from your friends and buddies that have been there, but you want an idea of what the fish are going to be doing, but you got to figure stuff out for yourself. You can't go down there and throw a frog where your buddy told you they was biting a frog 2 weeks ago. More or less, I've never been good at that. When somebody tells me where to go fish, it's really rarely worked out for me because I can't catch somebody else's fish. I have to find my own, and it's hard to duplicate what somebody else is doing. So just keep that in mind. You want to get an idea of what's going on, but you got to figure it out for yourself. Take good notes during practice. Pay attention to when you catch a fish. That's probably the biggest mistake I see a lot of people make when they're practicing for an event or even during the tournament. They catch a fish, throw it back, or put it in a live well and don't think anything of it. They don't realize that every fish you catch is a clue to what's going on that day. So, if I'm out practicing for a tournament and I get a bite, I'm looking at my depth, looking at my water temperature, looking at what I caught that fish on or what I caught it off of, and what kind of structure it was on. You have to pay attention to all that, and you can get you a good pattern going if you pay attention. But if you just throw it back and just say, well, that was a good fish, and catch a few more in that area, you're not going to be able to expand. You're just going to be stuck in that one little area. You're not going to be able to find other places that are like that. Utilize the tools that are provided. Update your charts. People are always finding new stuff on these lakes. We have, all kinds of fishermen out there. Update your charts. Use Sonar Charts and Sonar Charts Live. That's a big tool that I use. Especially, I have Sonar Charts Live with my Ray Marine units, and I can have an updated map if I'm going into a small little canal or a small backwater that I'm having trouble running. I can get an idea of where the deeper ditch is at or where stumps are at or anything like that, more or less, so I can get back out and not get stuck. So that's a good tool to use as well, especially if you're going somewhere that's not that you're not familiar with. So if you're idling something, it's kind of dangerous. You can always use your Sonar Charts and Sonar Charts Live and next time you go back out, you'll have an idea of what's underneath your boat. Stick to your strengths. Find a technique that you're comfortable with and use it everywhere. I've took a jig and used it everywhere I've went, and that's what got me here, is fishing a jig, and we'll get to some baits later on, but that's what got me on the Elite Series, was throwing a jig. Swimming a jig, skipping a jig, just basically fishing a jig. It doesn't get any simpler than that. It's what I felt comfortable with. That's what I knew how to use. So you got to stick to something that you know, unless you're out fun fishing. You can learn and practice. You can try new stuff. But when it comes down to tournament time, if you're not comfortable with something you're trying to do, you need to go back and stick with something that you know. You're going to do a lot better. That's, when the going gets tough, fall back on what you know. That's the same thing. You always want to, if you're having a rough time during the tournament and you're struggling to catch fish, don't go out there and start drop shot in the 50 foot of water unless that's what you know how to do. If you're good at flipping a jig, just flip a jig. If you're good at throwing a spinnerbait, go throw a spinnerbait. Eventually you're going to catch some fish. Just throw something you know is going to work and just fall back. Don't go try and do crazy stuff. Don't get fancy. Keep it simple. Baits and techniques is the same thing. Don't go out there and try to do crazy stuff with crazy new baits. Just do what you know, and don't get caught up in what everybody else is talking about. Don't listen to old Bill here at the marina said they caught a 5-pounder on a shaky head in 60 foot of water yesterday, and you're up there on the bank fishing docks. Don't let that get in your head, because it does a lot of people. And that's one thing I'm going to have to watch out this coming season, is because all those Elite Series guys will mess with you. They'll get in your head big time. So I'll have to watch that. Keep a cool head. It only takes 5 casts. I mean, if you're out there and it's 2 o'clock and you're doing it at 3 o'clock, panic mode is probably already set in. Would have for me anyway. It only takes 5 casts. I just got back from South Holston Lake, up in Virginia and Tennessee line, and we had a terrible day. It was like 12 o'clock. We weren't fishing a tournament, and they started coming up chasing minnows, and we caught 18 pounds in 10 minutes. It can happen any tournament you fish. Don't get discouraged. You can kind of panic out a little bit and start running through your head, but don't go crazy. Just keep a cool head and remember that it's only going to take 5 bites and you could win the whole thing. Keep an eye on the time. This is one thing that drives me crazy. If I'm fishing a tournament, a lot of times I'll have my time, but until about lunchtime, I hardly ever look at it. This is probably something a lot of people disagree with me on. But if you keep staring at that clock, you ain't thinking about fishing. You're thinking about time, and all it does is make you fish 10 times faster than you need to fish. Unless you're KVD throwing a jerkbait, more or less you're going to be fishing too fast, and that's you don't want to look at it every 2 minutes. Not people that do it drive me crazy. After about 12 o'clock, I look at it every now and then, but I hardly ever look at it before then, because it gets in my head, and you don't want to. You have all this other stuff in your head. You don't want to add another thing. Places I'll rely on this coming season on the Elite Series. And this is just some of the stuff that I'm strong at. Some of the places that have got me to where I'm at now. Fishing shallow, less time spent searching during practice. We only get 2.5 days of practice on the Elite Series. The Classic and stuff's different, but fishing shallow, you can pretty much eliminate a lot of stuff. Instead of if you're fishing offshore, you have all kinds of different depths they could be at. If they could be suspended, they could be around bait, they could be around trees. There's just all kinds of crazy stuff. Fishing shallow, you've got all kinds of options too, especially on places that have grass. But you don't have to look too hard. You can look around the bank. I mean, you can figure out pretty much in one cove or creek what kind of cover they're going to be on. And that helps me out a lot. So in the short practice times, most of the events I'm going to be fishing shallow. There'll be a few events that I'll be fishing deep, and I'll poke around out deep. But more or less, I'll be up up shallow looking for fish just because it's a lot easier on me to find fish, and you save a lot of time during your practice, and makes it productive time. Fishing docks always have fish. It doesn't matter if it's a marina, a private dock, one of those big jumping trampolines that people jump out on. I've caught them off those. I've caught them off everything. Anything that floats, that creates cover, that creates a shade on the water, will hold fish. That's always something to look at. Fishing creeks and rivers, that'll be something I do. Narrows down the shallow fishing even more, because when you get in a creek or river, the fish are going to be around any kind of current break or something that's giving them shelter from the current. Fishing high percentage areas, laydowns, brush, boat ramps, just places there's fish. And that's one thing that I see a lot of people do. They'll drive past an area on the water and they'll say, dang, it looks good, and they won't fish it. If you go past an area and you say, that looks pretty good, then usually there's going to be a fish there. So that's one thing that I always do. If I go past an area and I say, it looks like there ought to be a fish on that, I'm going to turn around and fish it, because there's probably a fish on it. I want to be fishing areas overlooked by others, hard to access, and that's one thing that the aluminum boat's going to help me utilize. Even though it's a bigger aluminum boat, I'll still be able to jump stuff and not be as afraid to run over obstacles. So I'm going to do that. That's what got me to where I'm at. It's going places that others are afraid to go, or that are overlooked, that people wouldn't think there's fish in. Utilize your gear, your boat, like my aluminum boat. Use what you have. You don't have to have all kinds of stuff. You can just have a john boat. Make sure you utilize it. If you're just fishing to have a john boat or a kayak or canoe, utilize it. Make use of it. That's what I'm. My Raymarine electronics and avionics. To find my areas I'm going to be fishing. I get back to the motel, play around on my electronics and look at areas that I need to go check out, or put me some waypoints on stuff that looks pretty good. And that's one tip that I'll give you for helping you catch more fish. Use what you got. Here's are some baits that I'll rely on for this coming season. Keep it pretty simple. I got a bait that I can fish on the bottom, that I can swim. Is the mop jig. I use the Sasuteki crawl from Jackal that I can use as a trailer. I can punch it on a Texas rig. I can do basically anything with it. The fish love it. They'll eat it basically everywhere I've went. The break blade is just a chatterbait style bait that covers a lot of water, and the square bill, the Jackal Alaska, it'll, it's a square bill. You can cover a lot of water, get them to bite it, reaction bites, and it helps you find a lot of fish. And that's, those 4 baits really are my bread and butter when I go somewhere. They're baits that I know we get bites. They're baits that I'm comfortable in fishing. And the mop jig especially, it's a real good big fish, catching jig because of the living rubber. And that's the jig I've thrown for years. Since I was small, I fished in docks, swim it in grass, throw it in brush, fish it out deep. Something I have a lot of confidence in. You can use any kind of trailer you want to, but that's one of my favorite baits. And all 4 of those are really good baits to try. And you'll see all 4 of those on my deck of the boat at every event that I go to, more or less. Things to remember this season. Whether you're an Elite Series pro or weekend angler, you can use the tips that I shared. It'll help your fishing. The tips I'll be using to tackle the biggest year of my life. Just remember, keep your stuff organized, keep it simple, be prepared, do your own thing and relax. And remember, it's always, it's just fishing. It's not rocket science or brain surgery. Don't freak yourself out. If you follow those steps, you'll be in good shape. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep this PowerPoint in my computer, so whenever I go somewhere, I get discouraged, or if I forget, because I'm going to have to remember all this stuff. But the tips I'm using for the Elite Series, everybody can utilize in everyday life. I mean, it's not just fishing, even in work or whatever you're doing. It's going to make your job a lot easier. It's going to make your fishing a lot better. And, those few things there will really help you throughout your tournament day or throughout your fishing day, and you'll be in good shape. But just go fish. It's a fun sport. That's why I do it. We always make it a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but we make it a lot more stressful than it needs to be. And I'm the world's worst for that. And you just need to just go fishing. It's just fun. It's not meant to be tough or a pain. If you don't enjoy it, then don't do it. It's supposed to be fun. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, I'm sure we'll have some questions. Hopefully I didn't bore everybody off of the webinar. I want to thank Navionics and Bass Pro for making this possible, and thanks to everybody that's watching me. Sorry if I've been blinking weird, but
no, the blinking wasn't too bad, man. We've got a lot of questions for you, though. The guys have been kind of asking a few.
Okay.
Folks at home, there's a question and answer area on either the bottom or the top of your screen, depending upon your device. If you've got questions, start throwing them at me. I'll kind of organize them as much as I can. Keep the brand of toilet paper to a minimum. I'm sure we're just going to go with Charmin and call it good.
That's good.
Yeah, but
whatever I can steal from the motels.
Yeah, well, that too. You can always steal them from the motels, but if you're at bad motels, maybe you don't have an extra roll of toilet paper.
That's true.
Okay, we did have a question almost right away. When you were showing your boat and your organization system, Skylar, how are you doing your soft plastics? You touched on it a little bit.
Right.
But, specifically, this gentleman was asking, do you leave them in the bags? Do you take them out of the bags? What's your best way how do you like to organize it?
Basically, what I do is I'll take either a tote and I'll leave them in the bags. I never take them out of the bags. And some of the new plastics we have now even come in those blister packs that keeps the tail straight. Once you take them out of those blister packs, the tails are going to get crooked and they're not going to work as good. So I always leave mine in the bags. I'll either use the deep storage trays, like for big crankbaits and stuff, and I'll stack them in those in the bags, and I'll write on top of the lids what's in there. But I'll leave them in the bags, either put them in little totes, or I'll put them in those deep storage bags for easy access. But I'll always leave them in the bags for easy access. And if I want to put a bag in my pocket, I can that way. But if I have them in a tray, I can't put a handful of worms in my pocket, and they'll be messed up or have lint on them or something, cookies or something.
Okay. Another question we had a gentleman from Michigan, and he's asking a question I think a lot of younger guys might have. Do you have some recommendations on where guys can find starter tournaments? I mean, if they're brand new to this process, where can they go to find this stuff? I think sometimes you and I overlook it, but you talk about where some guys can go.
Yeah, FLW and Bass have grassroots levels. The Bass Nation, FLW BFLs. There's always club stuff that you can get in, and what it'll be is you'll have local clubs, but they'll be BASS or FLW sanctioned clubs where you can get to even the Elite Series through them, just through fishing club tournaments, and you'll work your way up. But BASS, Bassmaster.com, and FLW.com or FLWOutdoors.com both have information on that, and where you can join or find clubs to fish. And now that's a good way to learn too, is fishing in clubs. And that's one thing that helped me in my career, was learning from other people. So that's a good way to jumpstart your career for sure.
Okay. Neil had a question on skipping boat docks. You mentioned, as a jig fisherman, his main question really revolved around your rod and reel setup, whether you prefer a shorter rod, longer rod, what kind of, how you prefer to do that setup.
Yeah, and I'm a short guy. You can't tell on this webinar. I got a big head, but I'm a short guy. I'm 5'8", so I have to. I use a 7-foot rod. Now, you'll have everybody from 7 foot. You'll have people from 6'6" rods to 7.5-foot rods. I use a 7-foot medium heavy. It's a Duckett. It's actually Dean Rojas's a frog rod. It's made for frog fishing, but I use it for skipping docks because it has the tip that you need. That's a 7-foot medium heavy. That's a great rod to skip docks with. You can use shorter rods, 6'9", medium heavy or heavy action. Shorter rods you'll have more accuracy with, but you'll lose distance when you're skipping docks. And one thing that I've learned is I want my bait further under the dock than everybody else. So I use a little bit longer rod so I can get more leverage. But if you're just starting out learning to skip, you probably want to start with a shorter rod and thicker line, 20, 25-pound line. That way when you backlash, it won't be as bad because it's going to happen. And use monofilament. Go get some cheap monofilament. Get 20 or 25-pound monofilament and not a $30 roll of fluorocarbon. And just test rods that you like, that you want to try, and you'll find what you like best. Use heavier jigs, 1/2 ounce, 5/8 ounce jigs, and those are a lot easier to skip.
Okay. Along those same line, because you kind of mentioned it, Wyatt was asking about your favorite setup for flipping and then also frogging, because obviously frogging, it might be a different rod. So you mentioned Rojas's frog rod. So can you expand on that and your rod and reel setup for flipping and frogging?
Yeah. He actually makes 2 frog rods now, and I've just been with Duckett for about a month now, and I've been using, so I'm still learning what series, but basically my flipping setup, I'm going to use anywhere from a 7.2 or 7.3 to 7, even 8 foot. It depends on whether I'm punching or if I'm flipping or pitching. I like to pitch with anywhere from a 7.1 or a 7.3 heavy action rod. If I'm pitching, to grass or to wood or anything like that, I want a pretty stiff rod. I really don't like anything over 7.6 for just flipping, because I still want to be pretty accurate. I want to be able to get into places that other people aren't hitting. But for punching or for heavy cover, I throw a 7.6, 7.9, 7.11, or even 8-foot rod.
Okay. We've got Mark and Kevin coming up, but Neil asked the question as a follow-up. What's your go-to jig size when you're skipping, but just that go-to jig size he was asking about?
1/2 ounce is my 90% of the time. Yeah, and I meant to talk the frog rods too. I forgot to tell him about those. They make a 7-foot and a 7.4. The 7.4 is a thicker rod for like grass and mats and stuff. The 7-foot's for fishing around docks and for hitting in smaller places, easier to cast. Not as heavy a cutter, but the Terex is that line of rods. But 1/2 ounce is my favorite jig to skip by far.
Okay. Okay, we've got a question, and this is actually an interesting one from Mark. He happens to also be an X21 owner, and he's asking about how you're expecting to see, and this is something that guys can ultimately be aware of, gas consumption, pulling an aluminum boat versus a fiberglass, some of the advantages of it, and I imagine less gas on the outboard while you're out fishing.
Yeah, the way my trailer and boat's set up, the aluminum boat, that's one thing that, younger kids, they're just getting into it. And even seasoned tournament anglers, when you're traveling a lot to go fish, pulling a boat, my expenses are going to be so much less than what they have been in the past, just because that boat doesn't weigh hardly anything pulling it down the road, but it still handles rough water good. The outboard doesn't. I fished South Holston Lake for 3 days straight and used 1/2 a tank of gas, and I ran just about everywhere I wanted to run.
Wow.
And yeah, so I mean, it's it depends where you're going to fish at and stuff, where you're going to get gas. Because if you're having to run 50 miles one way every time, then you're going to use a lot of gas. But it's going to help a lot on your fuel. It's going to be better on your tow vehicle too. It's not going to wear it down. It's not going to hurt the transmission as much. It's just going to be easier on you in the long run.
Okay. This one is a question from Dale. And Dale was wondering, kind of an interesting question, and I'm sure this is based on personality, but how much interaction do you expect to have with your marshals? I think as guys consider, entering into the marshal idea and whatnot, I think part of that question, and I have this question a lot, is how much interaction do you expect, and is it something guys should do and expect the guy to talk to them?
Yeah, man, which, guys are different. If you draw me, you're going to have the time of your life. I'm going to just allow this, I'm not going to be nearly as boring as what I was on this, but we're going to cut up. We're going to have a good time. You're going to learn stuff because you're there to marshal to learn, and I'm going to know that. And if you paid that money to marshal, I'm not going to let you sit back here and not speak to you all day. I'm not going to get mad at you. I'm not going to throw no fits like you'll see some of them throw. Each one's different, but in the long run, you're there to learn and take you a notepad and pay attention. But I'm going to interact with them a lot. We're going to high five. We're going to hug. We might cry together, depending on the mood of the situation. I'm not going to be angry, or I'm going to interact pretty good. We'll be friends by the end of the day.
Okay, appreciate that.
Unless you're weird, don't do it. Don't do it because I don't want you in my boat.
Okay. Kevin's got a real good question, and that has to do with when you're on a body of water that you feel like doesn't have as good a population. What are you doing to kind of modify your baits in practice so you're not setting the hook on them, or maybe you do this all the time?
Right. If you're fishing an area, the way I look at it, that you're afraid of the fish that you're hooking in practice, I always hook a few. Unless I'm throwing a crankbait or something, I'll bend the hooks down in practice if I've caught a couple on them. But my way of thinking is, if you're really afraid of the fish population in that area, or if it's a lake that doesn't have many fish, then you're more or less better off to practice during the tournament. You need to find an area where you're going to get a couple bites. But even if you just shake those fish off, or you don't hook them in the tournament in practice, my experience, you'll catch a few of them that did, but they know it's not real. I mean, they're not stupid fish. Some of them are, but even them mouthing a crankbait or mouthing a soft plastic, I've seen that hurt me just by not setting the hook. I think I could have hooked every fish in practice and I would have had the same results. I don't think that there's ever been a situation, maybe a couple of times, where I know for a fact that the fish I shook off the day before is the fish I caught in the tournament. Because fish move so much in those little areas. They don't move very far, but they'll travel around in that little area. So, not setting the hook or bending your hooks over, you can do that. And you'll catch a couple fish that you wouldn't have caught. But if you're afraid, I just don't fish in there. I'll catch a couple and leave.
Okay. Wyatt is also asking, what's your favorite fluorocarbon?
I use this. I used to use Trilene fluorocarbon, and now I use this. It's Jackal makes it. It's a Japanese brand of fluorocarbon. It's pretty stiff stuff. I use 22-pound fluorocarbon. I like their line because it's weird pound tests. Like they make 4, 5, 6, 7 every pound test line that you could possibly find, and you could find it. There's Japanese tackle shops. You can Google Jackal fluorocarbon or something, you'll find it. That's what I use, and it's not crazy expensive compared to some of the other ones. That's the best stuff I've used, the best stuff that I've found, and I like the pounds because the diameter is a lot thinner. So like 22-pound test fluorocarbon is actually pretty thin. It looks more like 15 or 16, but it's stout stuff, and that's what I flip with, so it works real well.
Okay, we got 2 more, and then we'll get you out of here tonight, sir.
Yeah, man.
This is a good one. The gentleman is asking you, it's anonymous. I'm looking for one crankbait rod to fish all my crankbaits. He's recommending a length and a power. What's your take?
One crankbait rod for all crankbaits would probably be anything from, well, he limited me to one. Let's say Duckett makes a 7.3, or it might be a 7.4. It's 7.3 or 7.4, and somewhere in that medium action, you can throw big crankbaits on it. You might have some struggles with like a 10XD, but you can throw square bills on it. You can throw rail traps on it. You can throw basically any kind of crankbait you have besides the gargantuan ones that dive 40 foot deep. But that 7.3, 7.4 medium action, like I said, I've just been playing around. I've got they've got a bunch of different cranking rods, but that's that's the length I would look for if I was looking for one crank. I wouldn't want anything under 7 foot, that's for sure.
Okay. And last question, we'll see how you do on this one since you've been with us for a while. Dacker is asking, how often should he update his Navionics card?
As often as you want. I mean, it changes all the time. That's what every time I'm getting ready to prepare for a tournament, I plug it in, update all my stuff, and I have the freshest data. I mean, it's whatever you feel like doing. If you right before you leave for an event, because I mean it's been in your graph and you've been fishing Douglas for a week, and you're getting ready to go somewhere else, plug in and update it just to make sure. I mean, it might not have changed, but you better make sure, because I mean, if somebody else has a high spot mark that wasn't marked when it was updated, then you're going to be out of luck.
Okay. And I will expand upon that from a factory standpoint, working for the company.
Was I wrong?
To Skylar's point, no, you were dead on.
Okay.
We make so many changes to our maps. What I tell people all the time is Skylar, you're the perfect candidate. You want to update your card every week, because you never know where you're going to be on a body of water that might change a little bit. Yeah. What I tell customers is, if you are going to fish small bodies of water, you don't need to update it every day. But if you're going to fish big, large, expansive bodies of water, you know, fishermen are sending us logs. We have survey boats. We have researchers doing it. We have pro staff doing it. And those maps are changing constantly. So update your maps.
Yep. I agree.
And with that, we got one more from Scott. He says, I got to throw this in here. Okay. What's the chance of getting to see the X21 jumping to Beaver Dam this year to get to the hot spot off the grid?
Oh, very possible.
Good.
Very, very possible. Yeah. I hope that there's 20 cameramen there, so at least if I don't catch anything, that I'll be known for jumping the Beaver Dam.
There you go. There you go. Fantastic. Hey, Skylar, I want to thank you. I want to thank Bass Pro Shops for being a part of this. Folks, thanks for tuning in. I want to let you know the following. This will be up on our website, Skylar's YouTube page, various other places on the internet for probably about 3 days or so, 2 to 3 days. Give us a chance to record it, but share it with your friends. Let them know that you had a great experience with this. Also, our other Navionics webinars are also on our website. You can see just a huge list of different things. Some of the competitors to Skylar, I'm sure he's looked at some of them. They've watched his, so they're trying to get information from each other. So lots of information out there, navionics.com. But thank you very much, folks. Thank you, Skylar. Have a great night, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.